First, the Clippers get a W in Los Angeles in what was essentially a must-win game, tying the series up at 2-2 apiece. James Harden and Paul George both had 33. PG dominated in the first half while Harden closed strong with one of the clutchest playoff performances of his career. Next, the Sixers at home blow a huge opportunity to tie the series at 2 apiece as Brunson puts up a masterclass performance on offense, while the Knicks as a whole put up a masterclass on defense, shutting down Embiid and the Sixers for the entirety of crunch time. And last, but believe me, not least, oh, I can't wait to talk about that. Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second. It makes a massive difference how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. Trying this format out again, did it yesterday or the other day, but the entire discourse was about Joel Embiid because apparently I didn't hate on him enough. Talk about that further in the video, but yeesh. I like this format though. Let me know what you think of it if you haven't already. The Clippers play without Kawhi in Game 4 as they did in Game 1, and another thing they did, just like Game 1, is they got a win. Kawhi in Games 2 and 3 displayed that he was clearly not ready to be back, and he was ultimately holding the team back by being there. So it was better for Kawhi's health and the team's ability to have him hold off for a little bit longer. His timeline of return is currently indefinite, so who knows what impact, if any, he will have from here. It's damn unfortunate because the Clippers could be such a larger threat with him playing at 100%. The fact that they're tied in this series without him proves that. But without trying to implement an injured player into the offense, things opened very smoothly for the Clippers. And I specifically mean the Paul George brand of smooth. He had 16 first quarter points on 6 for 9 shooting, hitting 3 3-pointers, as well as a Euro step into an and one floater. The Clippers would score 39 first quarter points, but Dallas, well, they would shit their pants right out of the gate as they did in Game 1, ensuring that they would be playing catch-up for the rest of the game. Dallas scored just 12 points in the first 9 minutes, scoring 16 in the quarter in total. They would go 0 for 7 for 3, while LA had gone 8 for 11. Quite the stark contrast, and the score showed it. Even better for LA, PG's first quarter dominance became first half dominance as he scored 10 points and hit a further 3 3-pointers, closing the half with 26 points and 6 made threes. But even with that, Dallas still felt like they were in it this whole way through, and that can be blamed on 2 significant factors. One, Dallas's crowd did not let up. This is something a lot of people were talking about. Even down 20 plus, they were cheering for them the whole way through, and that momentum carried to the players because they started to wake up as the crowd tried to wake them up. And most notably, Kyrie freaking Irving woke up, as around halfway through the second, Kyrie went the fuck off after going scoreless previously, scoring 16 points and doing so without missing a shot, going 5 for 5 from the field and 3 for 3 from 3. He went on a single-handed 9-0 run with an and one and a pair of 3-pointers, one being on the break and the other right in the grill of Paul George. As a result of his offensive explosion, Dallas scored 33 points in this quarter, which was 6 more than LA. So hey, you beat them in the quarter, you're starting to compete with them, but you're also still down 17, so that's quite a deficit to have to deal with going into halftime. Luckily, they came out of the break strong. Derrick Jones Jr. got a poster on the Zubats. Kyrie continued to hit Kyrie shots, but Terrence Mann would hit a pair of corner threes, and while Kyrie was going off, Luka very much was not. He would go 3 for 8 in this quarter, getting blocked at the rim by Zubats, who would stay with him on the switch all game, by the way. He also had a horrible play where he missed a floater he expected a foul on, and he just pouts while the other 9 guys bolt and get back on defense. Like, what the fuck is that? There were a lot of chaotic 50-50 balls in this game. A lot of players throwing themselves on the hardwood, which is, you know, that's playoff basketball, baby. Derek Lively stood out to me as particularly good this quarter, doing the little things on defense and setting good screens, and he was involved in a great play where he got an offensive board off of a Luka miss, threw it to Kyrie, who would drive inside and get a filthy wraparound pass to Lively for a dunk. Lively also had a really nice two-man game play with Luka that got him a layup. Speaking of offensive boards, Dallas had 9 of them in this quarter, one of them being this Derrick Jones Jr. rebound where he rebounded his own miss and set a handoff up for Kyrie, who took the pull-up 3 and splashed it. PG would end the quarter with his first points of it, getting an and one on the break, but otherwise being quiet in this quarter, as was James Harden, who had 0 third quarter points. Because of this, Dallas managed to gain the lead, being up 4 entering the fourth. Kyrie started the quarter with his usual shit, just stepping back and waiting for the dumbass defender to go flying by and then splashing a 3. Kyrie stuff. PJ Washington got a great finish over Plumlee in the open court, resulting in an and one. Dallas elected to go small to close the fourth quarter, which would definitely bite them in the ass. Now, with no significant rim protection at their disposal, Dallas made the paint a lot more vulnerable, and James Harden took full advantage. He would completely swing the momentum back to LA almost single-handedly. He would hit 5 floaters, one of which was an and one with just a minute 20 to go. Kyrie had a ridiculous finish, a wild 3, and Luka had a semi-wild 3 of his own, but ultimately Harden's onslaught would bury the Mavericks, which means now the series is tied 2-2. Game 5 is poised to be a big one. Alright, so my key takeaways for the Dallas Mavericks. First of all, this was kind of an ugly Luka game. Feels weird to say that a 29-9-9 performance is bad, but his efficiency was poor, and honestly, that counting stats total isn't even that impressive for Luka Doncic, given what we know, what he is capable of. But Kyrie was Dallas's best player for this entire game, and you can really seldom say that. There are definitely a lot of games where Kyrie is very, very good, but very rarely is he actually outplaying Luka. We thoroughly outplayed him in this one, out-leadered him as well. There was a play in here, I think I pointed it out in the game commentary, that drove me fucking nuts. It's something that Luka has done before. He was just complaining about a call instead of getting back on defense. Now, nothing came of it. The Clippers turned the ball over. They did not do enough to take advantage of the very glaring advantage that Luka provided. But that kind of stuff, that's the margins in which you lose. And it's also a very bad example for your teammates. And just being as good as you are, if you're Luka Doncic, your teammates are kind of inherently looking at you and following by example. And that's just a poor example. Another note on Luka, his finishing has been horrible in this series, which is weird. Luka is one of the strongest slashers in the game right now, one of the strongest ones of all time. He's not an athletic, super high above the rim guy, but he's just very strong, very crafty, knows how to get the right angles on the glass, but it seems like either his touch is off or I don't know what's up. He got absolutely swatted at the rim by Zubats. He had a couple of different bunnies he's missed, and that's happened in the first 3 games of this series. Just he's either not getting to the rim at all, which he normally gets to a lot easier, or he's not hitting those shots at nearly the percentage that you expect them to. It's just a lot of jump shots from the guy, and that's why you can understand the more inefficiency. His easier looks, the higher quality looks, he's not getting them as much. He's getting step back jumpers and fadeaway mid-range shots and deep floaters and things like that. And those shots are just far more conducive to infrequency. The decision to not close with a 5 definitely confused me. Derek Lively played really well in that third quarter. He did a lot of small things, not a lot of things that show up in the box score, but the Mavericks won the fuck out of that quarter, and it was in part because Derek Lively was so solid at center. But they go into this quarter and they play Derek a little bit longer, and then they go with Maxi Kleber at the 5. And I talked about how that lineup was smart in the right context, but I don't know, there was a point where A, first of all, Lively had been playing good beforehand, but B, James Harden started tearing them a new asshole, and you would think at that point you would sub in a big man, but they still just kept sticking to what they were doing, and it was not working. James Harden had 5 floaters in that game, or in that fourth quarter rather. Holy shit. That's bad. It was so easy. So many easy points, and it did not matter how much Dallas scored on the other end if you're just going to give up those points to that degree. Yeah, just a very bizarre decision from Jason Kidd. I would have understood if he went with it initially and backtracked, but he stuck to his guns after it was pretty clear it was a bad idea. Kyrie did essentially everything he could in this one. He had 40 points. He did have 7 turnovers, but I think you're allowed to have 7 turnovers if you have 40 points. Those are the rules. I didn't make them. It's just true. Both Jaden Hardy and Dante Exum weirdly got 2-minute stretches in this one, and it seemed like it was literally Jason Kidd being like, hey, can either of you do anything? I'm going to give you a chance to prove to me you can do anything. But also with 2 minutes of game time, it's really hard to prove that. But he threw Jaden Hardy and Dante Exum in there. I was like, Jaden Hardy, didn't expect to see him. Not really a position of need for Dallas. They've got enough shot creating guards. That's why he's kind of been cucked out of the rotation. But yeah, he didn't do anything. Dante Exum, the only thing he did was he dribbled with his right hand, and like multiple times Russ would put pressure on his right hand, and he would just do anything possible to avoid switching it to his left. I was like shocked. I did not realize his left hand was that bad. Derrick Jones Jr., he was really awesome in this one. Probably the biggest bright spot for them. He had 14 points. That dude tries to dunk everything, by the way. It's kind of what I love about him. He played for the Bulls last year. There's some times where he gets to places in the rim where I'm like, how did you even reach that spot from where you jumped? Especially when there's a crowd involved. There was a play where he tried to do a putback dunk over Zubats, and I think it was like he actually pushed off of his back a little bit type situation, but he fucking so high up. His head was above the rim on this putback attempt. Luckily for Zubats' life, Derrick was not able to corral the ball itself, but yeah, I appreciate his energy. Very strong finisher, good defender, hits his open shots for the most part. This game, I think, is the perfect textbook example of something that I am always... I don't complain about it a lot on here, but I have before. And I don't know if this is the perfect expression for it, but I guess I would call it like fourth quarter fetishization. It's almost like third act type shit. It's like, you know, people, like it's like a okay, how do I convey this? Have you ever seen Rogue One? Rogue One is not good for the first 2/3, and then it has just a remarkable third act. Some of the best Star Wars content that exists, but the overall movie's kind of blah. That's how I feel about fourth quarters, where the people leave that movie with an overall fun experience. People tend to talk pretty highly of that movie because they left their last impression was a positive one. Your last impression is going to be the fourth quarter, how you execute in the fourth quarter, and that ends up dominating the conversation. But the reality is, every possession matters, every quarter matters, and you can bury yourself in a huge hole in one quarter, and it does not matter how fucking clutch and how dominant you are in a later quarter if you've already dug yourself a hole that's too deep. In the case of this game, yeah, they were a better team for the last 3 quarters. They outscored them by 18 points in those 3 quarters. They only lost by 1 point in the fourth quarter between the two of them. I think it was 32-33. But they won quarter 2 and 3 decidedly. But it didn't matter because LA had a 23-point cushion, so 18 points is a survivable run to give up. Dallas played the entire game on catch-up mode. That's the same exact thing that they did in game 1, and it didn't work then. It's a very bad look for them, and frankly, they really can't afford to keep opening games this poorly. They need to open strong, they need to start with their foot on the gas, and they don't need to just wait for their crowd to wake them the fuck up. That shit was kind of ridiculous. Like, if anything, they should feel lucky that the crowd supported them as much as they did, because I think there was plenty of reason for some boos to cascade in that arena. Moving on to the Clippers. Better without a hobbled Kawhi. I mentioned that in the commentary of the actual game itself. James Harden looked like a prime James Harden out there. 33 points, super duper efficient. I think he was like 12 for 17, somewhere in that ballpark. This was the most composed I think I've ever seen him in a crunch time of a playoff game in a game that's like kind of a must win. Obviously, it's possible to come back from a 3-1 lead, but you sure as shit don't want to be put in that position. So winning this one was huge for the Clippers, and James just went out there and fucking did it. Obviously, I mentioned that there were some defensive adjustments and rotational stuff from the Mavericks that I did not appreciate, but nevertheless, James Harden still took full advantage of it, and you can't knock him for it, especially just the clutchness of it all. I think he had 14 points in the fourth quarter. Huge individual run to close when, you know, the Clippers offense was kind of stagnating because him and Paul really hadn't gone off since the first half. He decided it was going to be him. Paul George, loved the first half. Would have been cooler if you kept it up, but you didn't. That's fine. Didn't end up mattering. Might have given you a little bit more shit for it if you did lose. But yeah, I don't know what that's about. It wasn't quite a Dame level thing. I think he had 26, not 35. But the first half and then the other half doing nothing thing anomaly is just so weird to me. Zubats must have like taken a how to switch on to Luka Doncic class, because what the fuck? Like, he is not getting burned by this at all. This was something we saw 2 different times where Luka could just destroy, they could break down LA's defense purely because Zubats had no shot of staying in front of Luka, or if not staying in front of Luka, not being tricked by Luka or not allowing enough space for Luka to get a shot off. But I have seen him switch onto Luka multiple times in this series, and Luka scored like 2 or 3 times. He hit a step back 3 on him in the fourth quarter. That's the only time I saw Luka score on Zubats. There was one switch where he stepped out of the paint, picked him up like 4 or 5 feet behind the 3-point line. Luka did a bunch of crossovers, tried to like set up in the mid post, and then did like a head fake. He did a pass fake, and he did a pump fake. Zubats didn't bite on any of them. He used just a brick wall right in front of him and forced him to pass it out. That type of shit is huge, and I think that's why the Clippers have managed to be way better in this series without Kawhi Leonard than a lot of people thought they could be, because Zubats has kind of been the third star for them to this point. You know, he hasn't been like a star, but you know, he's had very good numbers, and just in terms of impact, at the very least, he's very clearly their first guy on defense and their third guy on offense, and I didn't expect that he would be able to have such a significant role here, but he has done that and then some. Wild 3-point shooting game for the Clippers. They went 18 for 29, which is 62%. That's absolutely scorching. Honestly, that's kind of a point you could use for the Mavericks to like give them a little bit of a pass for this game, of being like, dude, they shot that well from 3, of course we lost. That's, yeah, I don't know, but it's definitely bad. And I don't think Dallas defended the 3-point line too poorly. There were some makes in there that were pretty fucking ridiculous, but there were a lot of things that Dallas did to execute late that were very poor. But other than that, there's not a lot to talk about the Clippers. It was just those 2 guys going the fuck off, pretty much. The play of the game, I'm going to go ahead and give that to the Kyrie pass to Derek Lively off of an offensive board. This was just a nice moment of connection between these 2. Truly adorable. And for the player of the game, of course, I have to go with James Harden. Insanely efficient, insanely clutch. When the Clippers needed him most, he showed up and then some. Huge James Harden game. I know 33 points doesn't necessarily jump off the stat sheet to you, but he truly dominated this game. Jalen Brunson wasted absolutely no time establishing his offensive brilliance in this one, as he scored 12 of New York's 17 first quarter points, which is of course cool for Brunson, but indicative of the offensive struggles the Knicks faced early. They were struggling to hit their shots, and they lost their rebound battle rather significantly because of it. They shot 1 for 7 from 3 in the first quarter, while Embiid was cooking them on the offensive end, hitting some nice post moves on Hartenstein. He also further displayed the playmaking improvements that he has showcased in this series, getting 4 assists in the quarter, which is a playoff career high for him inside of a quarter. He finishes Q1 with 10 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. He also played his best defense, as New York was held to 3 of 10 shooting in the paint, with Embiid as the rim protector. Philly would lead by 10 heading into the second quarter, but New York would respond, getting 30 rather than 17 this time around. Brunson continued to cook, but now his teammates were contributing. He would rack up 6 assists in this quarter. New York's shooting drought would also be personally ended by Deuce McBride, who would hit a pair of threes off of the catch back-to-back. Philly would respond with a pair of threes of their own. First was Maxey hitting one fading out of the corner, which was actually his 3rd three from that spot of the game. New York would go on a 14-2 run to start this quarter, and they would close strong enough to be just 2 points behind Philly at halftime. Philly would take their turn at the wheel for starting a quarter strong, opening with a 10-0 run. This quarter was more of the same. Brunson continued to go off. He was just great for the entire game. This quarter was honestly kind of boring though, because it became a free throw contest and a one-sided one at that. Embiid would get 8 free throw attempts as he would draw 5 fouls onto Isaiah Hartenstein, all within this 3rd quarter. Luckily, this quarter would end on a fun note as both teams would trade some 3-pointers. The score would only swing 3 points in this quarter, but it went in New York's favor, which meant that they were leading by 1 point going into the 4th quarter. Embiid opened the 4th trying to dime up Batum, but Josh Hart would block it. Brunson hits even more ridiculous and ones, but what ends up standing out for the Knicks in this 4th quarter was their defense. After being held to just 17 in the first, they hold Philly to 16 when it matters most. They also rebounded much better than they did to start, out-rebounding Philly by 11 in the second half, getting 10 offensive boards to their 4, resulting in 6 more field goal attempts. And honestly, the reason Philly couldn't hold on to this one is the officiating got a lot stricter in the 4th quarter, as New York would be called for just 4 fouls in this quarter to Philly's 7. Embiid would go 0 for 5 from the field, including missing a pretty open layup off of the inbound where he seemingly reversed instead of going left in an attempt to draw contact, I presume. I should also give credit to Precious Achiuwa. He was only in at this point to fill in for Hartenstein in foul trouble, but he would end up playing all 12 minutes of the 4th quarter because of his defense. He would record 3 blocks, including a big one late on a Joel Embiid 3. So New York walks away with the W, now up 3-1, heading back to Madison Square Garden in prime position to close this series out a lot earlier than many expected. All right, my Knicks takeaways. Holy shit, what a Jalen Brunson game. That's first and foremost. 47 and 10. He made 18 shots in this one. I feel like almost all of those were mid-range or floater or layups. One of those 3. And I have to ask, is there any player in history that you can think of who hits a higher volume of and one mid-range shots / like long floaters? Because I feel like this guy does it like 4 or 5 times a game. It's actually bananas. He definitely had at least 4 in this game, and I feel like he averages that. The other question I want to pose for the class, do we think that Brunson is the best 6'1" or under player since Chris Paul? Because I think he's better than Celtics Isaiah Thomas, and that's really the only other name that I can think of. I think there's a decent chance that Brunson will end up in the upper echelon of like best 6 foot or under point guards players in the NBA in history, which I think is an interesting class that you can, gain a lot of pride in, of just being like, damn, I was 6 feet tall and I was that fucking good. I'm taller than Jalen Brunson. I'm far from being that good, to say the least. Also, obviously this is in reaction to a 47 and 10 game, so I'm kind of riding a high here, but I'm kind of starting to rethink my 1A thing on Brunson, because I just didn't think that he could get to like as good as like Chris Paul, because I think Chris Paul, even though I do agree with the Becky Hammond take of like historically just tiny guards really does not work. There's only literally one championship team throughout history whose best player was like a 6'1" or under guard, and that is the Bad Boy Pistons, and that was a team that was more of a egalitarian conglomerate type vibe than just like one player individual dominance, even though Isaiah Thomas did have moments like that. But all that aside, I think Brunson's got to be in that category, And I think if he's not a 1A, if he's not a championship one option, he's about as close to it as you can be while being that guy's height. Josh Hart, not a good offensive game, finally broke the streak of just hitting 4 3-pointers on 7 to 8 attempts, but he made up for it with some ridiculous counting stats otherwise. He had 17 rebounds, including 5 of them being offensive. He had 2 of them back-to-back on one possession that led to a Brunson and 1 layup. He also got 3 blocks, including that one on Batum that I mentioned earlier. OG also killed it on the glass. He had 14 rebounds in this one, along with 16 points. Precious had some great defense in that fourth quarter. Just really, Embiid went 0 for 5 in the fourth, and Precious was not his primary defender. I think they were throwing OG at him and then having Precious like rotate over. That's becoming a very common tactic in the NBA. Just like put a bulky forward on this post-up guy and then let your center be a roamer. Very interesting. I feel like that's becoming much more prominent in the NBA. Anyways, what a godsend Deuce McBride is for New York. He was awesome in this one. Hit some momentum shifting 3-pointers back-to-back. 12 points. He was scoring really well in kind of all of these games. I think there was a game, might have been game 2, where I felt like he was forcing it a little bit, but that was it. And just to get a guy who's as good as him, as reliable as him, just kind of out of nowhere from the perspective of everybody else, you know, if you're a New York fan, you were probably paying attention to his development to some degree. But, you know, if you're not paying attention to the niche development of like someone who's not even a top 10 priority of the franchise, otherwise Deuce McBride is just someone who kind of came out of nowhere for people. And I knew that he was good closing the season and that he would be a factor in these playoffs. I did not know that he would be this key of a factor. Now, someone who I did think would be a bigger factor and who has been relatively disappointing in the playoffs thus far has been Donte DiVincenzo. I have said that this Knicks team, if that DiVincenzo 20-point per game streak from the closing of the season is just who he is now, that team is like legit probably a contender. Not the strongest one in the world, again, because I have my reservations about Brunson, but, you know, having him as a 20-point scorer, OG is a guy who can attack and score off of the catch, as is Josh Hart a little bit. Isaiah Hartenstein fills his role on offense very, very well, even if he has limited options. Yeah, that team sounds good to me, but DiVincenzo is not living up to his end of the bargain. He has not been a 20-point scorer. He has not been a sharpshooter. He obviously hit that huge 3 at the end of, or it was game 2, but that's kind of the only way he's made his mark on this series as a whole. Finished 2 for 7 from the field, 27 minutes as well. Tom Thibodeau pulled him at a certain point because it's like, if you're just not contributing on offense, he's not a bad defender by any means, but they do sometimes have better options than him. They definitely have with Hart and OG and all that. So yeah, interesting game from the Knicks for sure. Kind of just a Brunson masterclass, and then everybody else did their part on the dirty work stuff. As for the Sixers, very weird Embiid game. He started very hot. He had 14 first half points. He was cooking Hartenstein in the post. He made a lot of good assists in that first quarter. He was processing well, which is something we have been actively tracking. But New York turned up the heat a lot in that fourth quarter. The previously mentioned OG thing on him with the Precious rotating, he just got flustered a little bit more. Now, he didn't turn the ball over, which is huge because oftentimes he would just throw the dumbest turnovers under that pressure, but one way or the other was not getting off shots. He felt the presence of those other defenders. He was often passing the ball away to avoid the pressure, and they kind of iced Embiid out of the game. And if you ice Embiid out of the game unless Tyrese Maxey just completely takes over, that will not work. That your offense is done at that point if Embiid isn't scoring and Maxey isn't scoring. This was overall Tyrese Maxey's worst game of this series. Wasn't bad though. He's been excellent. This was just the first whatever game from him. He had 23 points on 21 shots. Kelly Oubre was absolutely massive in this one. He had 19 efficient points. I was super wrong about this guy. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I was super wrong about Kelly Oubre. I thought he was going to be a bad NBA player until he was no longer an NBA player. But it seems like just not having the guaranteed money anymore made him start paying more attention to things other than putting the ball in the basket, and it made him a way more well-rounded player. And then he's kind of allowed to expand on that, things that he can do putting the ball in the basket. He can also be way more efficient now. Kelly Oubre's a home run signing for Philly. Last, I have two more notes. They're both pretty random. The broadcast needs to hop off of Kyle Lowry's dick. The amount of, like, oh my God, the amount of plays where he did like the most minor thing, and they're like, that's a heads up veteran play from Kyle Lowry. And the thing is, that's like in the commentary playbook. Like when an older player is out there, you have to acknowledge the fact that they're old, and you have to acknowledge the fact that they have experience. And I understand that to some extent, but it felt like every time Kyle Lowry had any level of involvement, it was like, this guy's veteran presence is insane. And it's like, I get it. Let's move on. I'm not a Kyle Lowry hater. What a weird player to be a hater of that would be. But it's like, dude, just have a new thing to talk about. But whatever. The other one I want to talk about briefly before we talk about the Phoenix Suns, the reaction that I got to the last video. Y'all were pissed off about Joel Embiid, man. I didn't realize that the injury, the intentionally injuring or not debacle with Mitchell Robinson was like as big of a discussion as it was. So I kind of recorded that underselling it. So I should have given it more weight in that coverage. But I want to say in general, I'm not here to like indict Embiid's character. And even if I was, that's not what the whole video is going to be, because my job and what I'm doing here is covering the basketball game that happened. And I feel like with a lot of the comments I got, it was almost like they were just mad that I didn't make a 20-minute video shitting on Joel Embiid. I would sometimes take that angle, but it's not really a productive one, and I don't think it was in this case. And I personally, I understand you have a dog in this fight. I'm not trying to get caught in a turf war between people from New York and people from Philadelphia, but yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. Basically, I'm just going to talk about basketball. Y'all can leave that other shit between yourselves. The play of the game, Jalen Brunson's running buzzer beater over Embiid. The angle on this one, the shot getting off, the fact that it barely rolled in, just a very satisfying shot to me. Probably not the most impressive one of the game, but certainly my favorite. Jalen Brunson, of course, had 46 points and 10 assists. He was clutch as hell, good the entire game. Okay, this is the thing we're all here for. Phoenix Suns. Good job, guys. This is how you run an NBA franchise, ladies and gentlemen. All right, I'm not actually sure where to start. Actually, you know what I am? I am sure where to start. I want to give some flowers to the Timberwolves first. I kind of fucking love this team. I really like a lot of the players on it. I like the structure. I like the way this roster is organized. I like that it's dispelling the myth of Rudy Gobert being a bad playoff defender, as I've been dying to see happen. Very much disproving that myth. It's like, oh, wow, he has other good defensive teammates, literally more than half of one, which was Royce O'Neal. Suddenly, the defense is not exploitable in any capacity. Shocking. But yeah, Anthony Edwards is a fucking superstar, and straight up, I couldn't believe the amount of people who picked the Suns to win this series. And I'm not calling anybody out, but almost every NBA YouTuber that I watched, I think literally every single one of them, almost all of them picked them to win in 6 or 7, so it wasn't decidedly. But did you guys watch the same Phoenix Suns team that I did? Like, Kenny uploaded a video after they went down 3-0, and the title of it was, I can't believe they're going out this sad. And respectfully, Kenny, I fully disagree. I could not be less surprised that they are going out this sad. I have seen this coming the entire time. The entire time. I have, from the moment Bradley Beal was traded to the Phoenix Suns, I could have told you that this team was going to be a first-round exit that sometimes has impressive offensive displays, but does not have the mold and the character and the design and the synergy and the heart or the game plan or the coaching or the defensive intensity or the effort or the intangibles, everything about basketball besides for dribbling yourself into a mid-range pull-up, this team was not gonna be good at. I literally said the other day after they went down 0-2 that their mascot after Kevin Durant joined that team might as well have been a red flag. Everything that we know to be how you don't build an NBA team anymore, this team did to the biggest extreme. They are paying their top 3 guys $50 million a piece. And all of them are making that money for the next like 3 years. And they're all getting older, except for Devin Booker. Devin Booker's like 27, but 28. I have known this team was going to be shit this whole time. And to be honest, I haven't had this level of confidence in knowing a team will be bad in a very, very long time. But I have just seen over the years what we are consistently seeing actually win you a championship is a roster that has a plan, a game plan that involves multiple different role players and isn't just about setting up 3 different scores, and having star players who have synergy with each other, who can play off of each other, whose skill sets complement each other and are not just redundant. Straight up disrespectful to the Timberwolves. So many people picked the Phoenix Suns. It was disrespectful to the Timberwolves and way overrating Phoenix. Now, I thought Phoenix would win a game in this one. I predicted this to be I think I said 6, but closer to 5 than 7. I got a lot of pushback on that. I should have said closer to fucking 4, as it turns out, because this was a sweep. To be fair, this is probably the best game that Phoenix played. Devin Booker had 49 points. Kevin Durant had 33. You may have noticed I didn't actually recap the specific game because I don't think it's that important, really. Because more or less all of these games were the same. Because every Phoenix Suns game is the same. They play the same all the time. Their offense is so simple, so predictable. But moving on past just the structure of this roster, when are we going to realize that Kevin Durant isn't that guy? Can we finally admit it, that it's over? Because it's fucking over. Whether or not you think that a prime peak 2014 Kevin Durant can be the best player on a championship team, definitively, whether or not you think he was in the case of the 2017 and 18 Warriors, but regardless, like bona fide, no question best player on a team who wins a championship, I think he could have. I'm not that big of a Kevin Durant hater that I don't believe that. This Kevin Durant, 35, going to be 36 when next season starts, Kevin Durant who does not have any kind of burst, who does not get to the rim, who does not shoot threes at a very high volume. So that means that all of his efficiency is coming from the fact that he is just lights out for mid-range. And look, he can literally use his mid-range ability and his height to coast to 28 points a game. And that's chill. But in terms of having a bag, in terms of having multiple options, in terms of punishing the defense in multiple different ways, Kevin Durant doesn't do that anymore. Kevin Durant does the same thing all the time. And that's why they got away with Cat defending him. That's insane, but it actually kind of isn't when you think about it, because Kevin Durant, there's no danger of Kevin Durant blowing by Karl Anthony Towns. That's not going to happen. What he's going to do is he's going to size him up. He's going to do, a couple of back-to-back crossovers, and then he's going to pull up for mid-range. And Cat is probably going to get a hand up. Whether or not the shot goes in, that's up to fate. But it's also not a good possession. It's not a high enough volume and not a high enough percentage possession to be a good one to be consistently looking for, to actively search for. And it means that in general, this team is just generating shots that are not the best. These mid-range pull-ups, the redundant skill sets I mentioned, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, they love those shots. Love those shots, man. And that's fine. The thing is, mid-range shooting has a place in the NBA. What it doesn't have a place as is the primary go-to what your offense is looking for. That's gone. Offenses do not do that anymore, and it's for good reason. We are in the 21st century. Every other team in the league knows this. Every other team operates this way. But for some reason, and I would say it's fucking hubris, It's ego. Kind of, frankly, I don't want to say a misunderstanding of how basketball works, but there's some degree of that in there because, like, shit, this is fully like you guys thought you could just ISO your way into a championship, and that's fucking ridiculous. And Kevin Durant has made such comments in the past before that indicate that that seems to be what his mentality is. And he's very much hooper pilled. Like, he's the type of guy, I believe a couple of years ago, he had Zach LaVine in his top 10. That type of shit. Good for him if that's how he wants to view the game, but frankly, if you actually want to win, getting a bunch of hoopers on your squad isn't actually going to do it. You need a hooper or two. You need the shot creating, isolation, no one can stop me one-on-one guy. You need that guy. However, you also need, you know, KCP, Alex Caruso, who's a good Warriors example. You know, Draymond Green, who I guess is the fourth one. That's probably a little too good of a player. Those rosters were really thin, so it's hard to pull an example from them. Why am I blanking on just champion? Derek Fisher for the Lakers, you know, guys like that. And this team has had none of them, and the Brooklyn Nets had none of them. And Kevin Durant seems to have a lot of sway. I think he has very much sway in what gets done. So he probably signed off on this Beal trade, signed off on all that Nets shit. When he was on the Golden State Warriors, he was complaining about their motion offense and how they weren't getting him enough isolations. Like, the Warriors' motion offense was flawed and it actually needed to have a bunch of bad mid-range shots inserted into it. I guess they're not bad, it's Kevin Durant, but like by contrast to what the other options are, there's also just no accountability with Kevin. Like, he immediately after this game, and to be fair, it's not like he commented this, but this release that he was like complaining about his role on the offense. This is the roster that you helped put together, man. He's like complaining about them running pick and roll, but it's like pick and roll is a pretty fundamental play, and you've given them very few options because you don't have offensive dynamics because all the players have the same skill set. So fucking obviously they're running pick and rolls all the time because that's really all one can do when you don't have more exemplary or a further list of options. Kevin Durant is not a championship #1 option anymore. He's not. He should be a second player. He should be the second best player on a team. Unfortunately, Devin Booker is probably not the greatest first option. I do have some hope that he could be, but he's definitely not right now, at least, you know, one of the top couple of guys you'd want. But I think if Kevin Durant, I will say this, I'm so confident in this. The thing that Kevin Durant could do to really turn his legacy around, at least to some degree, to at least make it go out on a positive note, because he's getting older, go to OKC. I don't know how that gets orchestrated, but if Kevin Durant could go to OKC, win a championship for Oklahoma as the second best player, the second fiddle to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the offense would be unstoppable. He would fit into their defense because the one thing that they need is a tall power forward. It would be great. I don't know if he's going to do that. It would be real sad if he just spent the last couple of years of his career trying to make this Phoenix Suns thing work. But given his propensity to ask for trades in the past, I feel like it probably will not last that long. I'm going to get more. This video is fucking long as shit, so I'm not going to worry about it right now, but I am going to discuss the Phoenix Suns future in another video. But yeah, that's it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this one, and goodbye.